No, I can't look. It's too bad. Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man, I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. So you guys know, man, we got the Champions Chess Tour final going on, and this is the title match. Wesley So versus Magnus Carlsen. Well, Magnus Carlsen versus Wesley So. I mean, he's playing white, and then Wesley So's playing black. And this game is really for all the marbles in the first set. So Wesley So has to win this game. He can't draw the game or lose the game, because then that means that Magnus Carlsen does take the set. So, of course, all my people coming from the Philippines, I would say Maraming Salamat. Anybody who is coming from Norway, I would say Tusen Tak. But let's take a look, see what we got for this game, homie. So we got the move E4, best by test. We got C5, the Sicilian defense, and then we do see the move C3. And this is known as the Alapin variation of the Sicilian defense. The idea is fairly simple. Black has played their wing pawn out, hoping to exchange it for a central pawn. And so basically white is just basically copying that same idea. They're hoping to push D4, and then after pawn takes, they have given their C pawn, but they have gotten a D and E4 pawn center, which is ideal. So we do see knight to F6, and then we see E5. I attacked your knight. Oh, but wait, it has knight to D5, so it just, I thought it was trapped, but it's not trapped. Anyways, we see knight to D5. We got the knight going to F3. We do see D6. That pawn on E5 is just looking a little bit too good, man. You really don't necessarily want to go F6 to challenge it, because you kind of open up your king a little bit. So D5 is the most logical pawn break. We do see D4. Pawn takes D4, and then actually a very interesting decision by Magnus Carlsen, and this is typical of what he does. He goes queen takes D4. So it kind of negates what I said earlier about, C pawn recapturing. There was definitely the better move in the position, but I mean, Magnus is always the type to try to throw the opponent off some kind of way by playing craziness. So that is what we actually see right here. We got the move E6, just making sure that our knight stays put. And then we do see bishop to C4, and white is like literally just abusing the knight. It's like, why not take, and then we're good to go. But black, Wesley So's like, bro, I'm not even gonna give you a chance, man. I'm gonna go knight to C6, attack your queen, and then what are you gonna do? So we just sidestep to E4. We're good to go. Bishop goes to E7. We see castles and castles. Pawn takes D6, and then we do see queen taking D6. And this does allow the queen to develop pretty naturally. So, I mean, you kind of just need to do something with your bishop here, and then you're good to go. We do see rook to E1, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is a half-open file. An honorable mention, though, was rook to D1. It wasn't that it was that much better, but it does put the rook opposite the queen. And, I mean, generally, when you put a rook or a queen opposite a king or a queen, I mean, usually, you kind of have a little something going on. But we do see rook to D8, and this is the novelty of the game. Pretty crazy because, I mean, this is a completely open file right here. So why not, move your rook onto a completely open file, which is what you want to do with your rooks. We got knight B to D2. We see the move B6. Like I said, Wesley So is needing to get this last bishop into the game. And then they are all, he's all the way solid. And there is a specific idea that Magnus Carlsen is trying to do in this position, but he kind of slightly doesn't go about it in the correct way. We do see queen going to E2. The idea is you do have this queen on D6, and if you can get this knight to either C4 or E4, you can place a nice attack on the queen. But the problem is this specific move allows black to place an attack on white first. So we do see knight to F4, and you don't really have a whole lot of places that you can really go, if you're white. And so we actually see the queen going back to F1, and this is not really where you want your queen at. Your queen was actually in the complete center of the board, and that is really where you want queens at, right there. So if we go back in the position after we see the move B6, black trying to get their bishop out, something that you definitely can do. It's a very similar idea, but it's just a little better way of going about doing it. It's actually dropping the bishop back to B3, vacating the C4 square, and then after you would probably see bishop to B7, you would see knight to C4, and knight to C4 is just in time, even though black has gotten, their bishop on a really, really nice diagonal. So this is definitely something else that Magnus could have done, but we didn't see that. Like I said, we do see queen going back to F1, and you can just see like the subtle difference how much more passive this is. It's not like it's just lost, but it's definitely not as ideal as the other position would have been. So we do see queen going back to c7. We see knight to b3. Another one of the ideas with going bishop to b3 and knight to c4 is, you know, this bishop on c1, it needs to really kind of go somewhere. So that would have definitely moved the knight out of the way and allowed the bishop to develop a little bit more naturally. So knight going to b3, this does kind of like, you know, make it a little bit less possible for this bishop to move right here. So it's not 100% ideal, but I mean, everything is pretty much everything for both sides. We do see bishop to f6. We got bishop to e3, and then we do see the move a6. And something that Wesley So is understanding is you will see Magnus Carlsen going forward, understanding that he has a little bit less space, and trades are going to benefit his position to be able to kind of like give him some breathing room. So Wesley So is not trying to give Magnus the opportunity to trade pieces down. Also, going into a further middle game and end game, you know, Wesley is working to try to, you know, maintain his double bishops, especially with the space that you have. It's going to be a little bit more beneficial. So you see the players fighting against each other with these things. You got rook a to d1. And one of the other things is, like I said, Magnus Carlsen is wanting to trade pieces down, and it's just going to give him a little bit more breathing room. This knight is actually really, really inconvenient where it is, but you don't necessarily want to trade a bishop for the knight because then that gives Wesley So a little bit more of a favorable endgame. We do see bishop to b7. We got rook taking d8, bishop taking d8. You had to go that because this pawn was double hit right here, so you can't take back with the rook. We do see rook going over to d1. We got bishop to e7. Bishop takes because, I mean, there really isn't a great way for you to get your queen out and also to save your bishop if this knight is influencing all of these squares right here. So we kind of had to get rid of it. So bishop does take f4. We got queen taking f4, and then now Magnus is able to get, you know, move his queen out of the prison that it was on f1 because, like I said, it was not ideal to be on that square. So we've improved the queen just a little bit. We do see b5 gaining a little bit more space and backing this bishop up. So we do see bishop to d3. We got rook going over to d8. You know, also asking, you know, if you move this bishop anywhere, I can go into further trades. We do see the move g3. And the interesting thing about the move g3 is, the thing about it is, this is actually the best move in the position. So this was definitely a nice move for Magnus to find. The only thing that you have to be thinking about is this move g3 by nature is you know, giving you some light square weaknesses around your king. This bishop is really, really on that diagonal. So if Black can find a way to try to get, you know, this bishop and this queen kind of like, you know, eyeing this king, it might be kind of an issue. Also, you know, it's not relevant in the position now, but if play is not correct by white, you can possibly see in the future, maybe even a rook takes you know, this light square bishop. And basically what you'll be doing with that is you'll be highlighting the weaknesses around this white king. So like I said, it's far off. You know, it definitely takes some certain play by white to get into that type of position. But these are things that you have to be thinking about, you know, if you are creating possible future weaknesses in your position. We do see queen going over to g4. You know, like I said, the light squares are a little bit weak around white's king. So, you know, you're trying to highlight that. Magnus Carlsen, like I said, is trying to go into these trades. This more or less forces the trade. You really don't have a lot of good places to go. I mean, you can always go to g5, but I mean, white is going to continuously improve their position from that point. So we do see queen taking e2, bishop taking e2. We got knight taking d4, knight taking d4, and then we do see bishop to c5. And this does, yes, improve your bishop quite a bit from e7, but you will see that Black is definitely not trying to go into trades that simplify the position down. We do see king to f1, and we actually see the move g6. And to get into what I was talking about a second ago, let's say, for example, you do trade. You're like, hey, man, I'm going to go ahead and get, you know, I'm going to strap white with this isolated pawn. You would be going into a more or less equal endgame. So you would be seeing bishop takes, and then rook takes, pawn takes. And this is just too simplified a position for you to really get anything out of it. Yes, white has an isolated pawn right here. The bishops are the same color, and it's pretty much dead even. It's really going to be hard for either one of these sides without a big blunder to really force anything, beneficial in this position. So, that is why, you hear people all the time, when they're telling you to study chess, to be like, hey, man, study the end game, right? Well, the reason why people say study the end game first is simply because when you understand what type of end games are won, drawn, and lost, and kind of what positions are more favorable for like sides with specific types of material, you understand when you're in the middle game and even the opening, what decisions are going to greatly influence your chances when you get into an end game. So as you understand, Wesley So looking at this, he's calculating this in his mind and he's saying, man, you know what? This literally doesn't get me the win that I need. This just gets me a draw. Generally, yeah, draw is not that bad, but in this situation, it does lose him the set. So he's obviously not going to go into this type of an endgame. So that is why after king to f1, we do see him go g6, not change anything. Also, like I said, he has double bishops at the moment. It's not really that favorable for you to just give up your bishop for this knight because you're not getting into like a one endgame or anything. So that is why we see him just holding here. We got king going to e1. We got the move e5. Knight goes down to b3. We see rook taking d1. We got bishop taking d1. And then we do see bishop going back to b6. Obviously, we do not want to allow this capture right here. And I mean, even though it's like pretty even, white definitely has the benefit of having these double bishops. One other thing going into this type of an endgame, when you have a knight and a bishop versus two bishops, is the knight is a short range piece. The bishops are longer range pieces. So if black can maintain these pawns on these different sides of the board, it's going to favor them just a little bit more because since the bishops are longer range pieces, they can attack so many more areas of the board over what white can do. This knight is definitely inferior in this type of an open endgame. So we are going to see Magnus Carlsen trying to force ways to try to trade material down into a favorable situation. We do see knight to d2. We got bishop to c6 and then bishop goes to f3. And in this specific position, it is actually okay to trade on f3 with this bishop. You would be going into like a legitimate endgame. It's not like it's absolutely won, but I mean, it definitely is favorable. But we see the very human reaction. Like I said, Wesley So is not wanting to trade his double bishops, and simplify the position and basically get into a completely drawn endgame. Magnus Carlsen isn't quite the person you want to go into a completely drawn endgame with because sometimes he finds ways to literally just win the game. We do see bishop to d5, so this does allow Magnus to slightly increase, his bishop. We do see king to f8. We got b4. We see king to e7, and like I said, what white is shooting for is to try to literally just extinguish the pawns on the queen side, and then we just have pawns on one side of the board, and it's going to allow his knight to be a little bit better in the endgame. We do see the move c4, and we have actually reached a position. There is a really strong move that Wesley So can play here. It's not that it's won, but it is definitely very favorable for black, and it's definitely a situation where you can force a win out of that. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video and try to guess that move, go ahead and do so. Okay, so the first thing I'll show you is what was actually played in the game. And it wasn't that it was a blunder, but it basically gives white everything that they kind of want. What we see in the game is a5. And this will go into a variation of what I was kind of telling you guys before. White's aim is to try to reduce as much material on the queen side as possible so that we just have pieces on one side of the board and then his knight will favor a lot better. So that is what we see in the game. But the move that I'm actually looking for is bishop to d4. It might not look like a lot, but one of the drawbacks of Magnus playing this b4 move is that it places a pawn on a dark square, and it's really hard for the knight to really hold that square. He doesn't have a dark square bishop, so you are making threats of bishop to c3, pinning down and also attacking this pawn. So you would probably see something like maybe king to e2, bishop to e6, encouraging a trade. We would probably see bishop taking e6, king taking e6. And because of the dominant bishop that you have in the center of the board, and you have just improved your king, you are getting into a much better endgame. Pawn would probably take, pawn would take, knight going down to b1. You have to prevent you know, the bishop from going to c3, attacking your pawn. And then we'd probably see bishop to b2. And this is definitely much better for black. But we do not see that. Like I said, we do see a5. And this really kind of gets Magnus everything he wants. Pawn takes b5, bishop takes b5, and then we do see knight to c4. And you see that Magnus is forcing situations that Wesley so really doesn't want to be in. He's attacking this pawn right here. He's threatening to attack this pawn and push this pawn further. He's also attacking this bishop. So you really don't have much better at all than to just go ahead and go into this trade. As you guys are probably aware, after bishop takes c4, we got pawn taking b4. Yes, black has an extra pawn, but it is opposite color bishops, and you guys kind of know what that means. So just running through these moves, we got g4, we got e4, king to e2, f5, pawn takes. We got f3. We don't allow that trade. We do push e3, and this bishop is holding that pawn very nicely. We got f4, and this is a small little strategy. He is trying to split these pawns apart so that this pawn can't ever defend this pawn. But the problem is you would really need a dark square bishop to really attack this pawn. You'd also maybe need a knight. And I mean, Magnus Carlsen doesn't have any of that, so this is holdable. We got h6, bishop d3. We got king to e6. We do see the move h3. We got king to f6. We got king to f3. And then we see some repeats by these bishops. And we are getting into a situation where this next move is going to be a threefold. And this is the draw that Magnus Carlsen needed. So he does take that first set. Even Magnus himself, though, mentioned that he's not better than Wesley So. He believes that he is equal to Wesley So. The only difference is psychological. Magnus Carlsen is feared very much, even by these players that are, you know, arguably on his level. So the game that he won before this one, you know, he was basically saying it was a psychological win. Magnus Carlsen just has a way. It's kind of like Garry Kasparov when he was playing. He just has a way to get in people's heads and really just make you see ghosts. And so it affects your play. And so that is definitely something that's in chess as well. But maraming salamat sa king makaibigan po sa nanonood ng king ma video. Mabuting pagbati and God lagi to you guys. Tusen tak and God Morgan for anybody coming from Norway. And I'm going to see you guys next time.